So, Belton Road. Daniel Andrews is going to get called before a Senate inquiry where he is going to have to answer questions about why did he do the multi-billion-dollar dirty deal with China. Eric Abetz, well, he said this tonight to Peter Credlin about what some of the questions he might be copying.
Belton Road initiative has been a debt trap for many countries around the world, and the problem is with a Victorian government in Australia signing up, it gives a cloak of respectability to this terrible, terrible initiative.
And then Jim Molan, of course, we got this nonsense today that when Daniel Andrews was asked about this in a press conference, well, he was too busy to engage. Once again, the senator from Tasmania.
He basically said that he was fully immersed in the COVID situation and therefore wasn't turning his mind to it. Well, if he can only deal with COVID, and that's all he's been dealing with, can I say it's been a pretty terrible effort.
Well, but also, Jim, Senator Molan, let's be straight here. You can walk and chew gum at the same time. I get it that it is the main deal, but when he has a deal with a foreign power, he should have to answer questions about it, especially when, thankfully, in about a couple of hours' time, regional Victoria is going to come out of many of the restrictions and hopefully Melbourne will be out of them in a few weeks too.
Yes, but Paul, so much of what he has done, he has refused to comment on, has refused to answer questions, he has just denied. So why would we expect the Premier now to be any more open on Belton Road initiative? And Eric will run an excellent inquiry, but as he said there before, and Eric's been pushing this so much, and we've got the Foreign Relations Bill coming through. It's not yet passed, but I hope it's passed by the end of the year. And it'll look at all the bad deals that we've made across this country, but the worst, of course, are down there the potentially worst are down there in Victoria. But Premier Andrews will definitely find a way to be too busy. I reckon one of the major faults that he has had in the way he has run this in his own state, and I've said this before publicly, that he has taken on far too much himself, and then which takes him away, being so busy, from the ability to look down on what's going on, to say to himself, I wonder if the actual quarantine is working. I wonder if people are walking out the front door. This is management and leadership 101, which I just don't see down there.
Does that surprise you that he fails Management 101, James?
No, not at all.
No, not at all. I mean, we've seen how he's gone all the way through this. It's been a complete failure, and I think with this Senate inquiry, we're going to see him do exactly what he's done throughout this whole thing, which is to just lie, obfuscate, deny that it's a problem, and leave us wondering what exactly the truth is. We don't know what the MOU is with this thing, and I don't know why that hasn't been made public.
Correct. What about vicious slander? Yeah, sorry, Pauline, I was going to get to you next, but go for it now.
Yeah. Paul, I'm very concerned about the Belton Road, what the Victorian government was going to do, and they saw it as foreign investment coming into the country, into the state and helping the state. But why is it any different? And now the federal government wants to rein him in, and they say, oh no, we're going to change it so that under the Constitution it's about the national security and safety of the country. But we need to have a look at the decisions that have been made by this government and previous governments. We've sold infrastructure in this country to foreign interests because we were pushing for foreign investment. We have 25% of our prime agricultural land in the Northern Territory in Tasmania in foreign ownership. We actually have, energy supply in this country in hands of foreign ownership. All our resources, so much of it is in hands of foreign ownership. So it goes beyond just Daniel Andrews. I question the whole lot what our federal governments have done in selling this country out, and it's not in the national interest. So I'd like to be a bigger investigation into this. Senator
Molan, why shouldn't there be a bigger investigation into the historic mistakes made by federal governments?
Yeah, I think it'll be a very, very interesting investigation. It's got to lead somewhere, and perhaps it will lead to the leasing of activities rather than of interest rather than the purchase of them. And that would make me a lot more comfortable. The consequence might be that we don't get anything like the amount of foreign investment into this country. That's the argument that every time I've raised exactly what Pauline said, that's what I've been told. Yes, we could do it, and we would look at things like the leasing of the Darwin port, which is the popular one. But when we do look at it, my understanding... I think certainly within the Darwin port contract, there is a retake clause, which you can do it at any time that we need to do it. So I'd prefer to do it after the Chinese spend $500 million building the port, then we take it back. So you could get your timing right on something like this, but that's just a tactical issue, Paul.
Well, I think that when we talk about foreign ownership, Paul, I'd want to be sure that we are talking about what the real problems are. I mean, I don't have any problem if, a Canadian teacher's pension fund, has a share in a tunnel program.
But that's code for Chinese money.
Well, no, but if it's not a Chinese company, I'm saying like if it's a foreign interest, some American interest or Japanese interest or Canadian or British or German. That's not a problem. The real problem is we have a strategic competitor in China, and I do worry that if we start talking about foreign ownership, we might be cutting off our nose to spite our face when we should be talking about the real strategic competitor and not empowering them, because there's not the threat if a Canadian owns a farm or a Japanese company owns a farm that there is if a Chinese company owns a farm.
Pauline, what do you think?
James, look, what I've been on about is the Northwest Shelf and the gas that we sell out up there. We have to see about $54 billion worth of gas leave the Northwest Shelf, and we have huge resources up there. 30 retention leases, 32 actually, retention leases. They've been tied up. Nothing's happening about it. No use it or lose it. And I've spoken to the government about this. And the whole fact is that if floating platform that Matt Canavan allowed to happen, they sink the well down, then they put it on the ships and they ship it out of the country. $400 million tax, that's all we got out of this. And they have built up such a reserve of tax credits, over $300 billion in tax credits. These foreign companies, they are going to take our resources. They're not paying us anything for it. If we should learn from Norway. You have about 4 to 5 million people over there. There's $1 million American dollars in the account of every man, woman and child in the
sovereign
country.
Wealth Fund.
They have sold their gas. Yes, it is. And we've done nothing of that in this country.
Well, I would say that the way to do that, then, is to make it easier for us to get our own resources out of the ground for Australian companies. If we're going to be talking about resources, we need to be talking about making sure that we do not stop, companies from having their own fracking projects here.
All right, Pauline.
It is the policies that are done by the government. When they did the gas deals here in Australia, they sold us short. We have done the same for Papua New Guinea, that are getting $1 billion out of their gases out there, and we actually set up the contracts for them, but we can't do it in our own country. We have had incompetent bloody politicians, we've had incompetent bloody bureaucrats, and we are paying the price for it because we are going further and further into debt, and we have got the most resource-rich country in the world, and we are bloody fools.
I'm with you. By the way, vicious slander is what... Sorry, Jim, I'll give you a chance in a sec, but I want to put this on the table. Vicious slander is apparently how China has described the foreign interference laws. There's also endless conversation about, the threats about trade being pulled. That's what the Trade Minister says. We don't have to be fatalistic about this, is what he says.
Well, there certainly shouldn't be an attitude of fatalism. China and Australia share a place in the same region of the world. We are both G20 economies, China the world's second largest, Australia the world's 13th largest. It is important that we find ways to engage, to cooperate, but also do so in a manner that is entirely respectful of each other and each other's sovereignty and each other's security and stability.
Jim, about that, or maybe what we were talking about before with gas?
No, I think this is much more interesting, Paul, than what we were talking about before. But I read this morning Paul Kelly's article in The Australian on our China policy. And we've just seen Simon Birmingham, and our government policy is very stable on this. Paul Kelly's article really examined it in detail, but he ended up by saying on the one hand this and on the other hand that. I think our China policy in all these areas is quite simple. And it must be that we welcome the rise of China because of what it does for its own country. We keep trading with China because we need their money for as long as we possibly can. But we use that prosperity that China gives us either to pay off our COVID debt or else to make ourselves stronger. Not just militarily stronger, we make ourselves stronger across our society in our manufacturing area. Going back to what we were talking about before, because it's relevant to this, we do not have a long-term national security strategy in this country. It's got nothing to do with the military. It is how we secure every aspect of this country in relation to going into the future. How can we understand how to get somewhere if we don't know where we're going? James was quite right. There should be Australian companies ripping this stuff out of the ground and sending it overseas and making vast amounts of money. But we don't. We need to have a national security strategy which tells us to do that as a government, and then we know the plan that we can take to get to that position. I think that's the biggest problem this country faces, Paul, the lack of a national security strategy.